Hello and welcome to another Brawl video. This week my supporters on Patreon voted for Tsagan, Raider Warlord, which is an alchemy card but actually doesn't have any alchemy specific mechanics, so could easily be printed in paper and maybe one day it will. This 3 mana 1/4 has double strike and the start your engines mechanic, and whenever Tsagan attacks, creatures you control get +1/+0 until end of turn for each creature you control with either first strike or double strike, and at max speed Tsagan has Death Touch, and other creatures we control have First Strike, which will then also enhance its attack trigger. So this deck is filled with creatures that have Double Strike and First Strike, as well as just efficient aggro creatures in general to try and get on the board quickly, hopefully get to max speed, and overwhelm the opponent with powerful attacks. So taking a look at our deck breakdown, I've split it up into a few different categories. Our first category here are additional cards with the Start Your Engines mechanic, sometimes allowing us to start our engine a turn sooner, so we can maybe get to max speed a turn sooner as well. Then we've got a few ways to protect our key threats, ways to make our creatures indestructible or give them protection, or just some discard effects to take away cards from the opponent's hand while still adding an extra creature to the board to progress our game plan. And then by far the largest category are the first and double strike creatures, ranging from 1 mana all the way up to 5 mana, but we are trying to keep the curve as low as possible. Then we've got our interaction, lots of spot removal, some of the most efficient removal spells in the Mardu colors at 1 mana, but also some creatures that can enter the battlefield and remove problematic permanents. And then we've got a few ways to give our team haste, in case we need to maybe wait a turn on deploying Tsagan, then it's nice to be able to attack with it the same turn we play it, so giving it haste is great, but also have other creatures that of course will heavily benefit from attacking the turn we play them. And then the miscellaneous section includes some mana acceleration, ways to maybe play Tsagan on turn 2 already, and then other ways we can maybe enhance our team or generate some tokens, which can also help us go wide to get the most out of Tsagan's attack trigger. So that's our deck in a nutshell. Now for the deep dive, starting with our Start Your Engine cards, we've got a Nesting Bot at 1 mana, can eventually get 1 extra power, leaves behind a servo when it dies, so it makes it easy to keep a board presence. Then we've got the Bastronaut, which is probably the best way to start our engine on turn 1, since we're likely to increase our speed turn after turn thanks to Menace, eventually gaining double strike as well, so has even more synergy with Tsagan. Then there's Hazoret, which is maybe not the best turn 2 play, even though it can start our engines. Much better if we're already at max speed as a 5/3 indestructible creature with haste that can then attack right away. And then the Thrill Seeker is excellent, as it can immediately get our speed up to 2 the same turn we cast it, as it also deals 1 damage to the opponent when it enters the battlefield, so it makes it pretty trivial to get to max speed. Then we've got our protection effects with the Giver of Runes, literally giving protection from the color of our choice. We've got Selfless Savior and Selfless Spirit that can be sacrificed to give our creatures indestructible. Skrelv can also give pseudo protection or maybe help creatures attack past opposing blockers. And then the Deep Cavern Bat, a flying lifelinking creature that can also snipe a card out of the opponent's hand for as long as it stays in play, and then can also maybe benefit from Tsagan's attack trigger. Then our first and double strike creatures start with a Battlefield Raptor, which also has flying, so nice evasive threat that can add on to the pressure. The Lancer will have double strike if we control Tsagan, since it's also a dinosaur. Fervent Champion has a few other knights to synergize with it, so it can also give those creatures 1 additional power, and even have an equipment that we might be able to attach for free. Goldhound has First Strike and Menace, so can often attack past opposing creatures, and can also be sacrificed, so we can maybe cast a turn 2 Tsagan if necessary. Ocelot Pride has been nerfed here in Brawl compared to the Timeless version, so it does cost 2 mana, but still an excellent way to go wide by making cat tokens if we get to the City's Blessing especially, and then also has First Strike, so still has great synergy throughout. Knight of Grace benefits from controlling a black permanent, so great with our commander, gets 1 extra power in that case, and then has First Strike and Hexproof from black. And then we've got the counterpart here, a Knight of Malice, a black creature with Hexproof from white. And then we've got our Sunhome Stalwart with Mentor. Since Tsagan only starts out with 1 power, we might actually get to put some +1 counters on it with Mentor. Then there's Thalia to tax all non-creature spells, since we don't have a ton of those ourselves, so it's mostly going to be affecting the opponent. The Orator can potentially inherit some abilities, such as Double Strike from Tsagan. Knight of the White Orchid can help us ramp if we're behind on mana, and still a 2/2 First Strike, whereas the Phantom is the newer version, can maybe blow up opposing lanes, and a 2/2 with First Strike and Flying. Then there's the Swift Wing with flying, first strike, and haste. Karizev has first strike and menace and makes an attacking Ragavan token, which we can get before resolving Tsagan's triggers, so Ragavan also benefits from the additional power. Lizard Blade's just a 1/1 double strike equipment that can also be reconfigured if needed. Vindicator has built-in double strike, vigilance, and trample. Blade Splicer will make a 3/3 Golem token, which will also have first strike. Then there's the Heretic Cathar, making opposing non-basics enter tapped, as well as opposing creatures entering tapped, so it's easier to keep attacking. And then we've got the 2 Alishas, both have first strike, both can return creatures out of our graveyard. And then a Florian can also provide additional card advantage if we make the opponent lose life. And Odric, a way to give all our creatures double strike potentially, so it can also be quite exciting, similar to Blade Historian, giving all attacking creatures double strike, which again will happen and then basically be taken into consideration with Tsagan's attack trigger, so we don't waste any additional power. And then Shadric's Silver Quill has flying and double strike, and can also assemble an army of Inkling tokens with flying, or can maybe enhance the creatures we already control. Then our removal includes that 1 mana Portable Hole and Swords to Plowshares in white. In black we have Fatal Push with plenty of fetch lands to enable Revolt, and of course Lightning Bolt in red. Then we also have Brutal Cathar, which can exile opposing creatures and even transforms into the Moonrage Brute with first strike, so there's even more synergy there. Skyclave Apparition can deal with problematic permanents with mana value 4 or less. Mardu Charm is pretty synergistic with our commander, as we can make a pair of first striking warrior tokens until end of turn, but can also deal 4 to a creature, or maybe use it as a discard spell. The Wandering Emperor can exile tapped creatures, or give us a +1 counter and first strike until end of turn, so that can also synergize with Tsagan. Eowyn can exile larger creatures when it enters. And then we've got Snapdax, which we can cast for 4 mana as a 3/5 double strike, but also very nice to mutate, so we get to deal 4 damage and gain 4 life, and also another dinosaur for some of our dinosaur synergies. And then we've got the 2 Evoke Elementals in white and red. Not enough black cards to really pitch a Grief, but a Solitude can exile opposing creatures, and Fury also has double strike, can deal 4 damage if we have an extra red card to pitch to it, or if we end up casting it for 5. And then our haste enablers include the Lava Spur Boots, as the 1 additional power is also quite useful on our double striker. Then there's Rising of the Day, giving all our creatures haste and legends 1 extra power. There's the Enduring Courage, which is quite good with some of our token makers as well, giving those 2 additional power until end of turn. And then Azariel can also make devil tokens, or give our team 1 extra power and haste until end of turn. And then finally, the miscellaneous section has some fast mana, with Crow Mox now a new addition to the format, Mox Amber with a decent amount of legends throughout, and then Springleaf Drum also good with our many cheap creatures that can now tap for mana. And then we also have Arcane Signet, another staple in most multicolored Brawl decks. And then we have a pump spell with Monstrous Rage, very effective with our double striking commander. A Ragavan can snowball an early advantage if it can connect and make treasure tokens. Then we've got a Jani making a cat token when it enters, and when that cat token dies we can transform it into the Avenger, which will then also control a red permanent if we have our commander out. The Flowering can give our creatures +1/+1 and our legends +2/+1 and ward 1, it's also very good with our double striking commander. We've got a Lotho, which can generate additional treasures if we manage to double spell. Vanguard can make additional soldier tokens, also a knight for our Fervent Champion, so there's more synergy there too. And then finally, Black Market Connections can be a nice source of card advantage, and since we're usually the aggressor in the matchup, we can aggressively exchange our life total for treasures, shapeshifters, and additional cards. And then the mana base is pretty self-explanatory, as many untapped lands as possible, since we're playing an aggro deck at the end of the day. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Alright, we're on the draw, facing Nadu, Winged Wisdom. Didn't think our deck was that powerful to get matched here, but what do we think of our opener? Can play a bat onto to maybe disrupt him a little bit. Our deck doesn't have a ton of removal for Nadu, and targeting it in the first place is not always a great idea. I do like the connection, since we can use our life total as a resource. So maybe this is okay. And then with the Mox we can maybe double spell the turn after we play connections and make a treasure. Expecting a 1 mana elf here. A Leather Armor, also a good one since it can equip for 0. Can play our tap land now. Alright, let's see what they're working with. Opponent's gonna Growth Spiral. So they can play Nadu and equip it for 0. And what else do you have? Time Warp, Scute Swarm, Shore Up. Well, if we're not gonna target their creatures, Shore Up doesn't matter too much. Scute Swarm is their eventual win condition. Time Warp is always effective, especially with Nadu, but at least the leather armor they can only activate once, so it's not like they can keep triggering Nadu with it. So I think I actually take the Scute Swarm just because it's what's gonna kill me, and it also makes lots of blockers, which can get in the way. So still planning to play Connections first. Opponent found, Cyclonic Rift. That's eventually going to be an issue too. Can also bounce our bats or just bounce our black market connections. So don't love that. And they could still shore up Nadu just to trigger it end of turn, but they're gonna keep shore up available. So they're equipping for free. Draw a card, it's a Tidebinder. Can counter or black market connection. Maybe they'll just Time Warp, alright. Trigger Nadu, find a halfling. Connections, triggers. Choose 2 modes in case your opponent does counter it here. But I guess we don't have to pay the life if they counter it. It doesn't shut down the connections because it's an enchantment, so I've got that going for us. So play our commander and then I can still play a 2-drop afterwards. And we could make it Karizev over Hazoret. We've got our engine started anyway, so if Bat attacks, we'll get to speed up to 2. They are hanging on to Cyclonic Rift, probably to overload it. So that's going to be a problem. Finds a safekeeping, so still no 7th land as far as we can tell. It's going to be Unctus, a way they can target their creatures for free by just paying 2 life. But at least it is limited to twice per turn now with the nerfed version. So no more Nadu triggers this turn. But next turn they're gonna get to overload Cyclonic Rift, which I don't think we can really recover from. So can choose 2 modes since our token's just gonna get bounced. Wandering Emperor. I guess I could technically take creatures out. And can play it at instant speed, so that's kind of nice. So for now, play another First Striker. So we can pump the team some more. Smash. And then trigger Karizev to resolve first, so that the Ragavan token also gets pumped. So that is a decent amount of damage. Alright, so our opponent's just jumping. And a safekeeping will make Unctus indestructible, so they can keep it. Alright, opponent's at 10. Pass. So if our opponent overloads Cyclonic Rift, we're gonna have to float our mana from our treasure. Second, still Wandering Emperor. We'll see. Start by triggering Nadu. They've got a lot of fetch lands to set up their Scute Swarm if they get it back. Heirloom and other cheap equipment. So they seem priced into holding up Cyclonic Rift. So they will have to sack those fetch lands before casting it, so they don't have them for Scute Swarm anymore. And then I don't want to cast Emperor end of turn, I'll just take my draw. Still happy to make a treasure, and I probably also draw a card. Kroxa is pretty useful when you're about to get Cyclonic Rifted. Okay, so I could move to attackers. Opponent casts Rifts, I float some mana, still play Emperor. And then I can still get to max speed with Thrill Seeker. Probably replay Deep Cavern Bat and take it from there. Could play max speed now, but I don't think that makes sense. So our opponent's fetching. I guess that also gets us to max speed. So this now has Death Touch. Other creatures gain First Strike, which also helps improve its own ability. Alright, so want to make some mana. If that happens, play Wandering Emperor. They do still have Shore Up available, so I wouldn't be able to exile Nadu. But at least I didn't waste all that mana now. Alright, so next up, replay Deep Cavern Bats, I believe. And then Alorian Revealed is scary, but Scute Swarm is probably the bigger concern, since we can try and go wide. Replay my commander. Play some Moxen. No time for black market connections anymore. And then keep the haste creature for next turn. We've got two of them, in fact. So Karizev makes sense. And then we'll just make a Samurai. And then I shouldn't be in danger of dying next turn. And we can play two more haste creatures. So then pretty much any of our attackers is going to be lethal. Opponent will lose one to Snakeskin Veil. Yeah, they can still draw 3, which is pretty scary in its own right. But at least they don't get an exponential number of Scute Swarms. So just gotta hope to dodge an extra turn card, otherwise we might be dead. A River's Rebuke would be deadly. And Nadu goes for Wandering Emperor. Discarding Boseiju.
Years of training for this.
So yeah, they don't have an extra turn card, otherwise they probably just would have attacked face. Opponent has removal for Deep Cavern Bat, get back Scute Swarm. Alright, so can they make enough blockers here is the question. Do they have a fetch land left, perhaps? They don't. Okay, so then our plan should be pretty straightforward. Thrill Seeker. Into Hazarets. And then I suppose we could play more creatures out just to increase our commander's ability, since we'll have more creatures with First Strike in play. But I'll maybe keep 3 mana available in case of any bounce spells. Alright, go to attackers. Do you have a bounce spell maybe? Sink into Stupor. Alright. Back to hand. Could still recast it. I guess her opponent actually mistimed it by not waiting until beginning of combat. And they seem pretty dead to me, but we'll see. So yeah, we don't get to pump the team anymore now, but we do still get to give the team First Strike, which may or may not matter. Shore up Nadu, that's fine. I guess it's untapped now, so they've got an extra blocker, so maybe the game's not over yet. Although as I see it, they're still taking 5. So yeah, the 2 haste creatures out of nowhere were able to get it done. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Kroxa, so red-black discard deck. Our hand's got some good ways to protect our commander. Just a 1 First Strike creature, but might still be able to make this work. Probably will have to start with a tapped Triome. But then turn 2, I could go both Giver and Selfless Savior. And then turn 3, player commander, with Karizev pumping the team afterwards. Thoughtseize will have a look. Possible they take the Solitude, which is our only interaction here. Takes Karizev instead, so no additional First Strike creature at the moment. Play this on white, and then double 1-drop seems fine. Stick to the plan. If Kroxa makes his discard, probably ditch Solitude. Keep the Knight. And then they'll have a hard time removing our commander. Get our speed up to 2 right away. And now a 3 mana for a Pyromancer. Could make some blockers. Could always use Giver of Runes to give protection from red to attack past him. And a nice synergy here with dual-faced lanes still producing an elemental since there's spells on the front. Ooh, Monstrous Rage. Well, we can just go for it here. A Knight of Malice. Attack. And if our opponent jumps, we'll just Monstrous Rage. Now if I do go protection from red, I guess that's not a problem since the enchantment here is colorless. So that's not going to fall off. Opponent's at 11. And maybe next turn we can set up an all-out attack. And our opponent scoops it up. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Loot the Pathfinder. So kind of a Teamer, Ramp, Exhaust deck. Not going to be an easy matchup, since a Ramp deck that can draw a lot of cards and deal damage to creatures is kind of our nightmare scenario. But we do have a decent hand, with connections providing some much needed card advantage. Can play Boots after we play Signet, so could just get a tap land on turn 1. So we have perfect mana. At least at 4 toughness, Tsagan survives 3 damage from loot. Alright, Ajani, also pretty solid. Opponent fetches. Could fetch now to play around an effect that counters an activated or triggered ability. But maybe we can still represent removal here. Alright, opponent's got a Mind Stone. So I'll get Triome here. And then Signet into Boots, I think, over Ajani. Just to develop our mana. And then next turn I could already play my commander, equip and attack. And Bloom Tender, a nice addition. Pretty recent on Arena, especially for 5-color decks, of course. Opponent is keeping up 2 mana, so they could have a counter spell. In which case, going end of turn Wandering Emperors may be the play. The loot does have Vigilance, so I wouldn't be able to exile it with the Wandering Emperor, sadly. And then next turn I could maybe double spell Connections and Ajani. It's going to be an Oracle of the Alpha. Hoping they tap Bloom Tender so I can exile it. I'm still going to play Emperor here. And our opponent's going to remand it. So now the coast might be clear for something else. Still prefer Connections, although we could also replay Emperor, exile Bloom Tender, and then it's not impossible that they're missing red mana for loot. Although Oracle then gets to finish off Wandering Emperor. So maybe we just avoid that mess by going Connections plus Ajani. Yeah, that seems reasonable to me. Should have maybe played land to play around Spell Pierce, but that seems to work. And there was also still the potential of a wash away countering my commander there. I guess Bloom Tender doesn't make red mana yet. But now a Solar Transformer can fix for red. Oracle Scries. So this can still tap for blue. So Wash Away is still kind of in the back of our mind. But I'll choose all 3 modes here. Try and get the game over with. So now try for our commander. See if that resolves. They had a Subtlety. Alright, so not quite as bad as a Wash Away would have been. So back on top of our deck. And then I could main phase Emperor, exile Oracle. And then next turn I can still cast Loot. Yeah, still kind of like playing Emperor here.
Finally, I'm home.
And attack.
This is what you get for hurting my people.
Could have also kept the cat token on defense, so we can maybe transform Ajani. A Mox Emerald found with Oracle. Not too impressive on this board. Yeah, I imagine our opponent's gonna just want to draw 3 with loot. So they make red. Could let Wandering Emperor go. I kinda still like protecting it so we can give more creatures first strike, which also results in more damage. Otherwise we might struggle to attack past loot if they keep it available. And then we get to transform a Jani if we'd like, since I guess that was a shapeshifter, so also a cat. Although that would mean a Jani is vulnerable to the damage from loot, opponent's just gonna shoot a Jani right away. But yeah, they could have let it transform and then, I guess, just shoot it once it's a Planeswalker, since I wouldn't have gotten a chance to activate it. Either way. Draw my commander, choose all 3 modes. And then we can play a hasty dinosaur. And pretty much empty our hands. Can put the counter on the Warlord itself. Sure.
I have got new moves to teach you.
Since we're only attacking with 2 creatures right now, next turn I'll probably want to split it up. Speed up to 2, opponent's at 10. And we've got multiple ways to make our team indestructible. Loot is likely going to draw 3. And we'll see what they can find. So Bloom Thunder makes 3 mana right now. Opponent's still digging with Mind Stone. Black Lotus, yeah, that's a good card I've heard. And do you have a way to spend all that mana? You do not. Alright, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Tatyova, a blue-green landfall ramp deck. So, what do we think of this opener? Maybe a little heavy on the 2-drops. No 3rd land yet. Might struggle to enable Lotho to make treasures. And I don't think we really need Skrelv in this matchup either. So I'll look for something a bit more exciting. This could work. Especially Rising of the Day and Brutal Cathar as creature removal. Can I afford to play Champion on turn 1? Would have to fetch an untapped red source. Now the Bastronaut is maybe a bit more of a reason to go for it. So I guess it would be black-red Blood Crypt. Sure. Could also play Bastronaut next turn and start with Champion. But this is pretty likely to connect next turn. And then we could go for a Selfless Spirit instead. And then likely playing the enchantment before we play our commander. Speed up to 2. Now a flyer can also keep attacking. And then maybe we can save Brutal Cathar to answer Tatyova. Ooh, a Mossborn Hydra plus Cub is a pretty deadly combination since they can put counters on the Hydra and then double them. So that could be a lot of damage out of nowhere. So, yeah, it's a pretty tough decision here. I think I still play Rising of the Day, or I could just play my commander if the plan is to next turn play Brutal Cathar plus maybe a Fervent Champion. Yeah, I guess that's reasonable, because if I play Rising now, then if I next turn play Cathar, I'm not really progressing my primary game plan, if you will. So we can maybe take a hit from the Hydra. There's not too many cards that would just straight up win them the game. Scape Shift comes to mind. Sacrifice 4 lands, maybe after playing a fetch land, and then we are very likely dead. Maybe someone can do the math in the comments to figure out how big this Hydra could get. But yeah, my guess is at least in the hundreds. Especially if they also have the new Capenna fetch lands that will immediately sacrifice themselves. So for now, Dryads plus fetch lands, so they can still play one more land out. So yeah, we could still face a lethal Hydra if we're not careful. So if they have another fetch land, we're super dead. And they do. Well, I guess I should just play Brutal Cathar when I had the chance, but yeah, I wasn't necessarily expecting Dryads plus double fetch land here. Yep, started out as a little 1-1 Hydra, but with a Cub especially, it's very scary very quickly. Was just hoping we would get one more turn. And an Explorer, why not? Do you have another land left? You sure do, and it's a fetch land. Well, they didn't need Escape Shift, just 3 fetch lands. I can sacrifice Selfless Spirits to block and make our commander indestructible, but unfortunately Hydra does have Trample. GG's. No Solitude in hand to exile it here. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the play, facing the Undertaker, so a Junt deck. Our hand seems reasonable. Enduring Courage should be decent in the matchup, since there's not many ways they'll have to exile it. And then for now, I could play this tapped, so I can play a turn 2 Vanguard if I'd like. Can just fetch Plains, or we might want to get Sacred Foundry, so we have double red for Enduring Courage. Swamps are a bit of a nombo with Blade Historian, so there's not many of those in the deck for a reason. For now, opponent's ramping with Into the North. So I could get my commander in play, get speed up to 2. And if I fetch, I can keep Blade Historian as an option. Yeah, white-black is not an option here with our fetch lanes, so I guess Blood Crypt versus Mountain. I guess Mountain's fine. Speed up to 2. If our opponent taps out for their commander, we can keep increasing our speed. It's going to be a World Wagon getting a land. And then for 1 mana, Cut Down. Wow, I was going to say Lightning Bolt doesn't work, Fatal Push, they haven't enabled Revolt, but Cut Down threads the needle here. So that's definitely a setback. Now we're looking at Enduring Courage, which still works pretty well with the Vanguard. Hit you for 5, speed up to 3, and hoping for another land so we can redeploy Tsagan. Ooh, Vorinclex, that's a good one too. Mardu Charm dealing 4 doesn't even answer it. Portable Hole also doesn't quite do it, plus they could also crew the World Wagon now as an extra blocker. So, not what we wanted to see. So maybe it is just Florian, attack all out and see what happens. I guess they would just block Florian then. But yeah, I do want to play this so we can find an extra card off of the ability. So then just attack like so. Got max speed, and we're just hoping to find a land here, which we did. And the pathway should do just fine. Play Ocelots. I guess we haven't enabled it, but we will have the city's blessing. And then we're getting ready for Tsagan to make his grand entrance. Overlords will blow up Florian, yep. Alright, so there's nothing to Portable Hole. If I play Tsagan, it will have haste. It will have Death Touch. The rest of my team has Double Strike, so that's going to be a worthwhile attack. So opponent seems pretty dead. And that does it. Awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Bristly Bill, mono-green counter deck. At least Portable Hole can deal with it. We've got Signet and Moxamber, plus a legendary creature. So reasonable hand. A bit light on first strike creatures. The Verge also unable to make a red mana at the moment, so we do need the fixing from Signet. And now the question is, do we Portable Hole the Birds of Paradise, or do we save it for Bill? Yeah, it's usually correct to just bolt a bird if you get the chance. And this might be one of those situations, although a Bill that gets big can be difficult to stop. And yeah, our author removal may not be able to take care of it. So I think I actually hold the Portable Hole. In which case I could have maybe just fetched a tapped Triome instead. Hardened Scales, also something we could exile. For now, just play Signets. And then I could Portable Hole now, although... yeah, maybe it is still worth it, just because next turn with a Moxamber I could play Tsagan and Ajani. Back to the command zone, so at least we don't have to worry about Bill for a couple turns. Opponent's gonna plot a Brawler. Alright, that's gonna be scary. No non-basics for the Phantom to hit. So then we're just looking at Tsagan plus Ajani. I'll get a Sacred Foundry, I think. Alright, at least this is an extra first strike creature to be able to pump the team some more. But there's now a Brawler. Followed by Bristly Bill, still hasn't played a land for turn. And it's already a 5/5 thanks to Hardened Scales. Alright, Thalia. So I can potentially channel Iganjo for pretty cheap. Yeah, I'm not gonna want to destroy any lands. Because then our opponent gets to trigger a landfall again. Could destroy my own, I guess, but there's no real upside. And then I think we still go for it. Even though our opponents will get to trade. Hoping to put Iganjo to use. Alright, so good eye Gansho now. So at least the Brawler is dealt with. Suppose I also could have considered using a Gansho on my cat, just so I could transform a Janny into a Planeswalker. Would that have worked out better? But then if I make a token, I only deal 4 damage, so would have been one short of finishing off the Brawler. Now Scavenging Ooze is a pretty big problem too, with plenty of creatures in graveyard. And Blood Crypt the draw. So don't have a particularly good attack, but I guess I can replay my commander. So I'm just going for it. The Ooze grows, picking up 2+1 counters each time. They do still need one more block. So things actually lined up somewhat reasonably. I get to increase my speed, I get to replay my commander. And then next turn we can try and get there with our flyer. And we can also maybe get to max speed and first strike damage, so then I still have Death Touch for regular combat damage. Other opponents also threatening a lot of damage. Play a land, trigger landfall. So it's lethal if they pump Scavenging Ooze, but they've already exiled all creatures. Case is solved. And yeah, just go to attackers. And that should do it. Opponent can line up some blocks. But they're gonna die to the Phantom. And there we get to max speed as well. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the play, facing Rocco, a Naya exile deck. Our hand could work out. No 1-drop that I can cast early, but we need to get our mana sorted anyway. And then still need a 3rd land as well. Hopefully Lotho can make some treasures for us. So we can just fetch a tapped Triome. No Surveil lands in this deck. Alright, Lightning Bolts could also make it easy to double spell for Lotho. Still would prefer to just draw 3rd land. Alright, we got our wish. Opponent is keeping up 1 mana, so they could have their own Lightning Bolt or Swords to Plowshares for all we know. So this turn I may be better off going Thrill Seeker, Bolt the Bird. And this can also increase our speed in the meantime. Can go ahead and attack. But we do want to bolt in our turn to trigger Lotho. And then next turn we can likely deploy our commander. Which also benefits from a Monstrous Rage. Opponent runs out Rocco, good target for Brutal Cathar. And a Knight. opponent still has equal number of lanes in play. Chandra also lines up pretty well to take care of Tsagan. So, yeah, maybe it is just Brutal Cathar, exile Rocco, attack. Could Monstrous Rage just to trigger a Lotho, although it feels better to save it for my double striker. Zariel also an option, but now let's just clear Rocco while we can. Still get to increase our speed. They might leave Rocco underneath the Cathar, implying that they have removal for it. But then at least they won't be playing Chandra and getting the benefit from Rocco. Of course they can play Chandra first, but then it doesn't trigger Rocco. And then now they're at least going to be tapped out, so the coast is clear for Tsagan. And Deep Cavern Bats. And Snapdax, 1 mana shy of mutating. So is this Tsagan? I guess it doesn't really trigger right away, so I could attack first. Send both at Chandra, and then Monstrous Rage should be pretty decent. I guess I should have played Tsagan first just to trigger Lotho, since they were likely making this block. Now I could go for the bat instead. Is that worth it? If we suspect that our opponent does have removal for Tsagan, maybe it's fine. And yep, they did have a path to exile. Still seems like the pick. And now they didn't get to trigger Rocco. But yeah, it is taking us a while to get our commander online. Maybe we want to play Zariel to give it haste. Not the scariest turn from our opponent here. So it could be a good turn to set up Zariel, and then a hasty Tsagan is going to be a little bit more effective. Or we could even mutate Snapdax on top of one of our other creatures. I think I like Zariel. It's not an immediate danger of dying. And setting up haste seems nice. And then we'll make a devil. Alright. Get in for 3. Had to quickly restart the game in case you notice any weird changes. And GT trigger prowess. Happy to chump with our token if needed. Valiant finds Boseiju. And replay Rocco. Could let Zariel take 3 now.
I'll deal with you personally.
And then GT could still untap a lands, but opponent finds a roaming throne. Mox Amber could be fun. But yeah, this is definitely a Tsagan turn. Or is it Snapdax also looks pretty good, to be honest. But I could play Mox Amber and Vindicator. And then attack all out. We have max speed, so I guess never mind, everyone will have first strike. So yeah, that's gonna be good enough. And I don't mind if Rocco gets to trigger here. I guess there is still the nightmare scenario where they have a 1 mana removal spell in hands and GT lets them cast it. But yeah, since we're at max speed, that should be a devastating attack. So Rocco triggers. Counter on itself. Play Vindicator, and now give the team haste. And then we control 5 creatures with first strike or double strike, so the entire team gets 5 additional power. And the math should work out in our favor. Alright, sweet. Glad I managed to restart the game in time. Alright, so we got to see our Tsagan aggro deck in action, and yeah, I'm quite pleased with how it turned out. It's a slightly different playstyle from the Ishin aggro decks, which are usually the Mardu aggro deck of choice on Arena, so it's nice to have an alternative here that doesn't limit you to playing creatures that have attack triggers, but let you explore other options as well. But yeah, the start your engine mechanic works perfectly for this commander, and it doesn't really feel like we're playing an alchemy card. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's gameplay. Want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.